Welcome back to the Joe Miller Show. This is KOAN Hot Talk, 1080 AM, 95.1 FM. The show is made possible by the McPherson Tax Defense Group, 1-800-BEAT-IRS, beatirs.com. That's BEAT-IRS, serving all your tax needs since 1978 with 2 generations of tax defense attorneys. Still have with us Dr. John Smarek. Of course, you know him, been on the show for a long time, a number of times since we started out earlier this year, a press secretary for pro-life governor, is a prolific writer, senior editor for thestream.org, and recently wrote a very interesting article about 5, as he puts it, page-turner conservative novels that have predicted the mess that we're in today. And we're just going to go through some of these. Each of these books, you probably get them all online, Kindle, because they're older books, range in time from 1908 to 1973. Dr. Smart, let's just start by talking about some of the issues we're facing today, and I'll have you match that issue to the book and the predictions in it. The first, there's been a mass exodus of non-Christian refugees sailing for the West in numbers large enough to overwhelm the countries for which they're destined. Tell us what book gives us a foreshadow of that.
Very powerful novel from 1973 called The Camp of the Saints by French Catholic author Jean Raspail, Raspail. And it is a staggeringly powerful novel. And it was written back in 73, the idea that the West would be overwhelmed by non-Western immigration just seemed like the most crank, obscure, paranoid possible prediction. But he saw it coming. He saw the kind of masochistic, pseudo-Christian compassion that had swept European circles. He saw that Christianity had been drained of its supernatural content and turned into a cult of compassion of so-called victims, but that those victims could be people, everything ranging from convicted killers to sex perverts to Muslim radicals. And in the novel, he shows how self-congratulatory and self-serving liberal elites essentially destroy Western civilization. It's a very powerful book.
And I have not read that book, but I would assume he married that along with the Islamic religious ideological drive to expand. Is that right? Looking kind of at the historical example.
That's part of the book. Though in the book, one of the main groups that's coming is Hindus, and that was a bit of bad prophecy. It turned out Hindus were not really a problem.
Right.
But the overall point of a foreign religious and politically oriented immigration as a form of colonization and conquest, nobody else predicted it the way The Camp of the Saints did. I strongly recommend everyone go read The Camp of the Saints.
All right.
It's grim reading, though.
Let's back up 10 years. Currently today, you could suggest that, I guess some call it eco-tyranny, eco-terrorism, the attack on sex and marriage. Those are kind of things that are going on in Western culture that back in early 60s probably were not so pronounced. What book gave us a foreshadowing of that?
It's a novel by Anthony Burgess. He's the more famous for writing A Clockwork Orange, but he wrote this before. It's called The Wanting Seed, and S-E-E-D, The Wanting Seed. And in it, he imagines the consequences if Malthusian population control and environmentalist radicals got control of Western society. He foresaw a society where transgender people, where eunuchs, men who had castrated themselves, and homosexuals were overtly favored by the government against ordinary people, where homosexuality was actively promoted and sterilization promoted because population was seen as the great enemy. And there was a paranoia of fertility and a fear of the family because the family results in children and children use up resources. And, he didn't mention carbon footprints, but short of that, he pretty much laid out everything that the Bill Gateses of this world are worried about in trying to restrict our consumption and stop us from reproducing ourselves. Very powerful, witty satire.
Yeah, he was an English writer. When you think Clockwork Orange, you don't necessarily think conservative. Was he
Right.
primarily a conservative writer?
He was culturally conservative. He had a Catholic background. He drifted away from it, but I think he was always basically kind of conservative. And in Clockwork Orange, remember, that was a warning against a utopian society trying to destroy human nature in order to regulate us, trying to take away our free will so that we would behave obediently to the government. So there is a very strong
Right.
libertarian/conservative message to a
Yeah,
Clockwork
the
Orange.
last time I was exposed to that was, my word, early 20s, I think. But one of the scenes that remains in mind, and I'm talking about the movie at this point, was the individual sitting in the chair with eyes pried open and being indoctrinated with, visual images. Obviously a
Right.
little more overt than what we see today.
Give them time at Yale.
Oh, no. I guess we have a little more ability to critique our alma mater, right? A little more inside knowledge. Anyway, that's another show, another few segments. But the next work is going to take probably a little longer than the 2 minutes we have left. But we're going to go to the decade before. Yeah, there is currently this idea, in fact, you mentioned it earlier today, that a lot of folk that try to especially project a Christian empathy treat criminals as wounded victims, private property seized by the state, used for the common good, morality turned on its head. Tell us a little bit about the book, The Decade Before, The Wanting Seed by Anthony Burgess, foreshadowed.
This is it's called Love Among the Ruins by Evelyn Waugh. It's a short novel, and you can currently get it in a book called The Collected Short Stories of Evelyn Waugh. It's a short novel. In Love Among the Ruins, the hero/anti-hero is a lifelong arsonist whom the government is keeping in a beautiful mansion along with his fellow criminals because they've taken the mansions away from the aristocracy and turned them into rehabilitation facilities for people with antisocial behavioral complexes. In other words, criminals. No one blames criminals. Criminals are entirely the product of a bad environment, and society is trying to make up to them for the fact that it inadvertently turned them into criminals. It's a future society that's entirely socialist. Yeah, there's no private business. Government businesses are chaotic and horribly run. There's only one popular government ministry, the Ministry of Euthanasia, where the people are always lining up around the block.
Got to wrap it up. We got to go to news. We'll take this up right after the break. Stay with us, Dr. John Samarik. Welcome back to the Joe Miller Show, KOAN Hot Talk, 1080 AM, 95.1 FM. This show is made possible by the McPherson Tax Defense Group, 1-800-BEAT-IRS, beatirs.com, BEAT-IRS. 2 generations of tax defense attorneys serving Alaska Americans since 78. We have with us Dr. John Samarik talking about novels that have been written this past century that have had a predictive value. But first I wanted to mention something we were discussing during the break. The Fairbanks, of course, the dark is really pronounced right now. Anchorage, a little less so, but still, shortest day of the year has passed. And Dr. Samarik reminded me of St. Lucy's Day. I'll put you on the spot a little bit, John. Tell us a little bit about St. Lucy's Day. What do you know the history of it?
Yeah, St. Lucy was an early Christian martyr, and according to her legend, her eyes were pulled out before she was killed, and God restored them to her just before her death. She was made patron saint of the blind, and I think because of the connection of her name, Lucia, with light, and her story with blindness, the church gave her feast day to the shortest day of the year. It was St. Lucy's Day, and John Donne wrote one of his most beautiful poems. I think it's called A Nocturne Upon St. Lucy's Day, and it's full of beautiful wordplay about light and darkness and the rising sun and the Son of God. It's just one of the most beautiful poems in the English language.
I'll look that up. I've not read the poem. Apparently, St. Lucy's Day itself is more pronounced in celebration in the Nordic countries, probably because of the dark weather. I'm surprised it's not celebrated broadly here in Alaska.
there's a big thing in Sweden, I think, that they do with candles. They put like candle crowns on the children's heads. If you ever saw the funny movie The Ref with Kevin Spacey, the wife in that movie tries to do the St. Lucie candle crowns with hilarious, disastrous results.
I can imagine. Well, I got to tell you, I mean, Fairbanks, I've lived up there with my family for years, and it gets dark. I mean, you've got about, maybe 3 or 4 hours. If it's overcast, you're looking at maybe 3 hours of a little bit of light. Sometimes it can be that short, and so it's with a great deal of relief that we pass that point and move into more daylight. So we're talking about the 5 novels. We've gone through The Camp of the Saints by The Wanting Seed and also Love Among the Ruins. And was there anything else that you wanted to say about Love Among the Ruins, or do you want to head to the next one?
Just that it's an extremely funny novel. The Christmas season is renamed Santa Claus Died, because all anyone believes in is Santa Claus. He predicted the collapse of socialist England really accurately and with a really kind of a morbid wit, and it's not so well known as it deserves to be. So you can get it in the collected short stories of Yves Lenoir, who's more famous, of course, for Brideshead Revisited.
And so Christmas renamed as Santa Claus Tide.
Yeah, like. And the ministry, the most popular government ministry is the Ministry of Euthanasia, where the lines are always around the block and everyone's cheerful and hopeful because they're going to get their ticket out soon.
Oh, wow. Well, so, of course, the next one everybody's heard of, and this kind of foreshadows a society where sex is abundant, guilt-free, offered with no strings attached, work is easy, pleasant, and brief, anxieties are dulled by happy pills. Tell us which novel you're talking about.
This is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. Now, many of your listeners might have read it, but they probably read it in high school. And when you were in high school, you were too young to understand this book because it sounds like a good idea to people in high school, especially high school boys. I read this. I said, this is great. Where do I sign up? You really should wait a few years. I mean, think about it. In Brave New World, all the sex you want, very short working hours. Everything is always new and clean and shiny. Nothing smells bad. And the only sacrifice is you can't have a religion and you can't read Shakespeare. Wow. Twist my arm.
So
that's because modern society has been remade to the lowest common denominator. It's like a 16-year-old boy had designed it.
And there really are some incredible parallels between Brave New World and what we have today, right?
That's right. Government nudging, the government teaching people to be happy with their lot in life, the separation of sex from reproduction, increasingly in vitro fertilization becoming the norm for people over a certain age, the separation of parenthood from the biological act, especially though the idea of enshrining momentary cheerfulness instead of any kind of long-term notion of joy or achievement or satisfaction. Really, we're just looking for likes. We're looking for thumbs ups. In society, we're looking for just happy moments.
And in fact, all of these novels, with maybe one exception, foretell a degree of hedonism, of course, that was not present at the time the novels were written.
That's right. That's right. In Brave New World, when it was published, adultery and divorce were still scandalous. In the novel, of course, what he makes scandalous is the idea of parenthood, the idea of any biological connection between children and their parents is transformed into an obscenity in the book because animals reproduce that way. We do it cleanly through the machine.
So the last book was written early in the 20th century, and I'll let you give some description of it, but effectively it described a society that has basically separated itself from any religious trappings.
Well, more than that, it's inverted them. This is a book called Lord of the World by Robert Hugh Benson, and it's a novel of the coming of the Antichrist. It is quite explicitly that. Its author was the son of the Anglican Archbishop of Canterbury. But he created a great scandal by becoming a Catholic and becoming a priest and becoming a popular novelist. He wrote Lord of the World as a warning of the dangers of what he considered excessive ecumenism, of people taking away the particularities of Christian faith, deciding that dogma and doctrine wasn't important. What really mattered about Christianity was kindness and understanding and tolerance and openness. Basically all the things you see in all the mainline Protestant churches that have died around the world, and that, some people detect in some of the things Pope Francis seems to be saying, which, threaten the Catholic Church itself. In The Lord of the World, a heroic figure appears. This guy comes out of nowhere, kind of like Barack Obama, and is awarded the equivalent of the Nobel Peace Prize, like Barack Obama. Unlike Barack Obama, though, he actually is the Antichrist. He actually has the power. He manages to avert a world war. He manages to convince nations to lay down their arms. He somehow inspires economic prosperity. He just really seems like a redemptive figure in the world. The only thing is, he insists that Christianity give up its stubborn insistence that it is the one true religion. He wants to create a kind of a generic, universal religion that everyone can be part of. And he insists, and any Christians who refuse are imprisoned and killed. And towards the end of the book, he turns his attention to the papacy. The Pope is like the only fly in the ointment of this utopia he's trying to create. So there's this apocalyptic confrontation between this master of Europe with all the armed forces behind him and a helpless, unarmed Pope in a white tunic sitting in the city of Rome waiting to see what will happen. And I don't want to give away the ending. It's like the Book of Revelation translated into novelistic form.
I mean, I guess I'll ask you personally. I mean, you think that that's kind of where society's at today?
I think a lot of the churches have gone in that direction. I mean, when you see the Episcopal Church creating a liturgy for same-sex unions, you see United Methodist clergy endorsing legal abortion. You see clergy demanding we open our borders. I mean, Pope Francis demanded that every church in the world open itself to a Muslim refugee family. Talk about letting the serpent into the garden.
Well, Dr. John Samarek, I appreciate the overview of these 5 novels: The Camp of the Saints, The Wanting Seed, Brave New World, Love Among the Ruins, The Lord of the World. Get them if you got time. Read them. I'm certainly going to pick up, hopefully via Kindle, 1 or 2 of these and go through them. Appreciate your insights, as always.
Thank you.
Stay with us, The Joe Miller Show. We'll be right back.